Osio Eli Chilugi, Sodadela, Oganale Eli Nageda, Che Ugidali Oniga, Che Chikamagi, Anigadua Eli Osahi. Hello to all and welcome to all my family, my friends, and everyone else that's listening tonight. I am Mashu Whitefeather, and I am Chickamauga and Anigadua Charlagi, or Cherokee, and also Osage. The song you heard at the beginning of our show was done by Bo Taylor, Eastern Band Cherokee, from his album Rebuilding the Fire, and that's one of our Cherokee welcoming songs and dances. At the beginning of the hour here, I'm going to give you our call-in number should you want to call in and have questions for our guest this evening, and that is area code 718-506-1564. Again, that's area code 718-506-1564. We also have our website, Just Us Radio Network, that you can listen to our show and also make comments there. And our man behind the scenes, Chimmy Bennett, can let us know if you leave messages there. My co-host is back this week, and kia ora, Doreen.
Kia ora, Marsha. Mihi atu kia koutou katoa. Hello to everyone listening today.
Doreen wasn't here last week. She was very busy in a conference, but she was able to make it back tonight. That's good. Glad to have you back, Doreen. Our guest this evening is Andrea Landry, and she is Anishinaabe Chippewa from Ontario, Canada. And welcome, Andrea.
Bonjour. Hello.
Bonjour. I was told that the old way to say that was aniniji, like hello, my friend.
Yes, it's anin in different areas, but in my territory it's bonjour, so it just depends on the dialect area.
Well, tell us a little bit about yourself. You're a very interesting person, and we have a lot in common, the three of us, Doreen, myself, and you. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, well, I currently am from a small community in northwestern Ontario, Canada called Pace-Flat First Nation. The Anishinaabe word for our community, though, is Pagwashin. It means by the water. We have about 60 people on reserve. But I also live part-time in Poundmaker First Nation in Saskatchewan, so in central Canada. I have my master's in communications and social justice, and I've been heavily involved in work of Indigenous people's rights within the United Nations systems, and I also have done a lot of work with the Idle No More movement. So I guess my passion in life really is advocating for the rights of Indigenous peoples and overcoming oppression within our communities, within ourselves, and within all Indigenous peoples of the world. So that's what I've been doing, and that's the work I've been doing for the last 2 years. And the last few weeks I've just been kind of relaxing at home, fishing, and doing some governance development work for my home community. So I kind of find balance between my home and the international work as well.
Oh, that's good. That's also probably kind of difficult at times, because I know that myself and also Doreen are also involved in the United Nations for Indigenous people's rights and issues, and I know that can be sometimes, demanding in itself.
Definitely. It's very hard to find the balance and maintain that balance, and it gets really lonesome, I guess you could say, when you're out there doing all this work and you realize how much you've been kind of neglecting your work at home and spending time with, your family and your relatives and spending time out on the land. So I think it's integral for us who do this kind of work to come back to our home community, put that work aside for a bit and focus on the work that's at home for us too.
Yeah, and you really mean what you say. You're a girl who walks her talk, because when I got a hold of you, you were fishing last night.
Yeah, I was. we have our fish derby right now, so the biggest catch wins a bunch of money, so everyone's just on the lake and out in the river fishing every evening. It's nice.
Oh, good one. So you said that you're attending the upcoming World Conference of Indigenous Peoples, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, so am I, and another friend of ours, Carl, is going to be there with us. So this will be my first time for that. So this is kind of another area I guess we're going into with this. So I'm kind of anxious to see how that goes.
I think fine, Master. Now that we've had a taste with the permanent forum in May, I think this seems like a little bit of an extension of that. Because am I right in saying the World Conference for Indigenous People, this is the very first one, Andrea?
Yeah, it's the first World Conference, but the issue is that the UN hosts World Conferences focusing on a variety of different issues and agendas, and usually they're about 4 days long. But the difference with this World Conference is only a day and a half, and I think that's where most Indigenous peoples involved kind of felt like they were neglecting our issues that we were bringing forward and cutting it down and basically keeping us quiet from having integral, deeper conversations on the issues that are ongoing in our communities. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges for this World Conference.
So we're actually going to be in meetings for like a day and a half, because I thought it was for 3.
It's a day and a half for the roundtable conversations, for the roundtable discussions, and I think there's 4 roundtable discussions that will be occurring. And there were even huge struggles with the topic choices. So the UN Secretariat wanted UN states to be the ones to decide what the roundtable topics were going to be. And it was a fight in it for Indigenous peoples to have the say on what we wanted to discuss at those tables. So it seems that ever since this World Conference was announced, there's been challenge after challenge after challenge that our people are just really trying to find a way to maintain the balance and to get our say within that agenda.
I know when we were at the permanent forum this year, all of the different states had their own caucuses, and this was for the Indigenous peoples, and I was surprised and kind of befuddled that our Indigenous American caucus was difficult to work with, and none of the other caucuses wanted to work with them, and that surprised me.
Yeah, so North America, as a caucus, decided to pull out of the World Conference. So the North American caucus doesn't have a designated delegation to the World Conference. The people from North America that will be attending the World Conference are people from their own individual organizations and nations. So there won't be a conglomerated mindset or a standard set forward for North America within that meeting, simply because North America has pulled out as a full caucus.
Okay, I've got all sorts of things going through my mind right now. Is that because our people need to really decolonize and start thinking more like Indigenous people, where we can unify better?
I think that was the main idea. The main reason that North America, the caucus, pulled out was because they felt that if they pulled out, other regions would also follow suit and pull out. And they felt that if we went forward with this World Conference, then we were going with the UN states and the UN systems, and it wasn't going to go our way, the World Conference. So their fear was that if we continued being involved in the dialogue and the planning and the discussion with the World Conference, then we were just following the lead of the UN or the lead of the UN states. So their reason for pulling out was they didn't want to follow anymore. But now we've reached this issue where North America is the only caucus that won't be represented there. And there's very little collaboration between any North American organizations right now. So it's quite challenging, very difficult.
So in hindsight, that was kind of a bad move, because I think even if we're there and we're represented, I think when you're working with any government, and especially ours, for this country, the European government that's here, it's a slow process, and I think with each time that you do meet with them, you're making a little headway. At least I'd like to think so.
Yeah, for sure. And when we went to the Lima gathering, the women's conference in Lima,
Mm-hmm.
that was one of the main things that came out, was nothing about us without us. And that was the theme that we went forward with when we were working on developing draft statements for the World Conference and that kind of thing. So it's difficult to see, because I also agree. I think that we have to be there to ensure that our voices are represented by, ourselves, as Indigenous peoples.
I agree. You need to be at the table. It may make a difference or it may not, but at least you're at the table.
Exactly.
And you can bring up things, while you're there, because I know with different caucuses and different meetings, with any kind of meeting, not necessarily the UN, you're going to have these things come out. Now, what's actually presented in the end may be something, may not cover everything, but, you have a way to voice yourself just in the preparation. And I think that's important. One of the things that I've noticed with our people, and I'm old enough to have noticed this, is that our people don't handle long-term goals very well. We decide we want something, and we want it done like yesterday, as opposed to looking at the long-term goal and doing everything we can to achieve it. And I think this is one thing that we have to get over, especially when working with organizations like the UN, because we're not only talking about our people, but we're talking about Indigenous peoples that are all over the world. So we really have to get in the mindset and train ourselves to work for those long-term goals.
Exactly, and I think that a lot of these issues, in regards to whether it's setting future goals or whether it's how we live, a lot of it is due to being, oppressed versus the oppressor. So when you look at, societally speaking or socially speaking, in every area of our lives, we constantly tend to claim the role of being the oppressed. And I think that's one of the main issues, and where we have to stop recognizing ourselves as the oppressed, and we have to begin recognizing ourselves as simply Indigenous peoples. So once we overcome that barrier of being oppressed and all the issues that face someone who has been oppressed their whole life, we've been oppressed for generations. Our ancestors were oppressed. It's basically ingrained within our DNA, within our bloodstream. In reality, if you look at it more deeply, that oppression is just the surface of who we are. That's just the skin layer of who we are as Indigenous peoples. And if you go deeper within ourselves, we have to begin realizing that we are not oppressed. The more that you go to your community, the more you go out on the land, you see all the skills that we have. And it's just that this political scheme that's occurring around us and that has sucked us in has also led us to believe that we are constantly in that kind of battle between, oppressor versus the oppressed. And I think that's also occurring within the world. People are slowly beginning to wake up and realize, okay, well, maybe I don't want to be oppressed anymore. I simply want to be Anishinaabe. I don't want to be oppressed anymore.
Well, that's one of the reasons Doreen and I, the founders of our organization called Two Feathers International Consultants, and we're writing up decolonization programs to get people about themselves, number one, and then within their family unit and in their clan, their tribe, and in their nation, and it's in hopes that this gets them into their traditions and culture and also language sustenance, keep the language going, survival, and like on this show, we do talk about the history a bit, but we don't dwell on the history, all the bad things that have happened to us, the negative things, because we feel, at least I feel, that you have to know your history in order to deal with today, but with that information you also build for a better future. But I find a lot of our people dwell on the past and happened, and I think that's, and of course that's because of the oppressors, and because of the mindset, because our people are not Indigenous anymore. And this is one thing we are attempting to turn around little by little.
Yeah, and I think it's a... Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to add to Marshu, what Marshu was saying. Even though we're two different Indigenous peoples, the impact that colonisation had on us has been the same. We've been a little bit fortunate here in Aotearoa, where one is our population is much smaller. Total population of New Zealand is 4 million, and we're about 25% of that. So it's a little bit easier to manage us as a people. But we still suffer the same effects of, poor housing, no education, all of those things that come with colonisation. So we still need to work on that at a local level. We have more and more of us that are becoming educated, where we're able to put them through tertiary education, through university, on mainstream and with our Indigenous universities. And we've been able to retain our language. So we've sort of moved quite fast as a people. But we still have a lot of families that don't know who they are, and some of it's intergenerational. So some of it's third and fourth generation that don't want to be Māori or don't know anything about being Māori. So we've got those ones that we need to work with. Because for me, learning about who I am and everything about us as Māori people and as tribal people has given me the confidence to move forward and then start making changes at the local, regional, national, and then I've been lucky enough now to go into the international arena, which gives us another perspective on how we can work with others to make it better for ourselves as well. And one of the key things working with Indigenous Americans and Māori here has been learning about ourselves through the voice of another Indigenous person. Now, for some reason that works over here. We just might be tired here in Aotearoa. I think we're a little bit tired of hearing ourselves, because it's us as people, our people, and it does get a little bit stale, I guess. And it's nice to have a fresh new approach to the same problem. And the answers are things that our ancestors, our tupuna, have taught. So the answers that we're giving aren't new. They're just the old answers that we're doing and presenting in a fresh new way for today.
I think one of the things that I really enjoyed about being at the permanent forum was that I met all of these Indigenous peoples from all around the world, and to me, that was wonderful. And the thing that struck me the most is that we all have the same history, and all there for the same reason. But it was, to me, it was one of the highlights of my life so far, being a part of that and meeting all these different people.
I think that's definitely the benefit of attending these international conferences and even national or even local. We go to these different meetings and we recognize the struggle that we're living, yet we also recognize how empowered we are. How empowered we are as individuals, as communities, as Indigenous peoples worldwide. You don't really see a lot of we talk about the painful stories and situations in our areas and our lands, but we also share a lot of the beauty and a lot of the happiness. And I think that's one of the most integral components of being Indigenous is that happiness and sharing that happiness. And that in itself is healing. So that's what I really find beneficial about attending those conferences and meetings as well.
I think the fact that we're even there at the UN is like something very positive in itself. Whether we accomplish everything we want at each meeting or not, just the fact that we're there says something about who we are, and we just have to keep at it. I mean, out of that has come the International Indigenous Bill of Rights, or Declaration of Rights, United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. And I noticed when I was in Aotearoa, I saw the same book there, but it was in English and also in Maori. I don't know if I'll ever see one in Cherokee, but the fact that they're out there in every country, to me that says something. That there is progress being made. Maybe not as fast as what we'd like to see it, but that's the way it works.
But Marcia, I think it needs to move a bit faster. We need to find ways to make it move a bit faster. Very soon we're not going to have any of our whenua, any of our tribal lands left if we don't start making a difference in whatever way we can.
Well, and I know exactly what you're talking about. Here on the state side of Turtle Island, I've noticed more and more communities are banning the fracking, but I know New York has done it where every township has the right to ban the fracking and the pipelines and all of that, but it's still not enough. They're still ongoing and they're still fighting, but it seems to me from what I've seen, on the computer and stuff, from different articles, that they seem to be backing down a little bit, or you just don't hear about it as much. I don't know which one it is.
I think a lot of it has to do with, I think it's ongoing. Can I talk a bit about what's happening in my community here with environmental violence?
Of course.
So right now, we're a small community of 60 people. We're right on the northern side of Lake Superior, so right at the tip around the lake. We have a massive body of water. We have the rivers running through our community. And right now we're fighting nuclear waste management depository.
Ooh.
So what the federal government is trying to do is they're trying to place this depository the size of a football field within our traditional territory to dispose of spent nuclear waste. And they're saying it's going to take about 10 years before everything's completed. But, with our chief and council agreeing with the process, the six-phase process, and we're in phase 3 right now. And within every phase, the community is given a lump sum of dollars from, they call themselves NWMO, so it's a Nuclear Waste Management Organization. And every phase they give a lump sum of money. It's supposed to be given to the community, and basically they're trying to buy us off. That's how I see it. They give their information sessions, and they provide, free iPads for people who attend. And they take the youth my age to Toronto or Ottawa to look at sample depositories, and then afterwards they take them to football or baseball games, and they pay for everything. And now you have all these young people agreeing to this because they're promising them jobs. And in our community, there's a very limited amount of jobs, so our young people are saying, yes, we need jobs to feed our children, because a lot of them have young children at home. So we have this battle ongoing, and it's devastating because, in 10 years, it's going to take about 40 years for all the nuclear waste spent rods to be transported into my community, whether it's by train or by the highway, because we're right on the Trans-Canada Highway. And they're saying how safe it is and how beneficial it is for the community.
Seem to have a little connection problem here.
Shocking. It's shocking, I imagine.
Yeah. Well, she's in a remote area, and that's why.
No, I mean what she's talking about.
Oh, yeah, that too. Well, it sounds like the information that these companies are giving out to these young people isn't very truthful, because anywhere where you've got nuclear waste, there's been studies done in other places where that has long-term health effects on the people around them.
Mm. Yeah, but look at how they're trying to buy them. That's disgusting. How they're trying to buy them out. Take them to again.
That's your corporations. That's why they're doing that.
Mm. Yeah. So
back to this, Andrea.
Yeah, so I think that what it's come down to really is, 70% of the community is agreeing to it right now. So we have about 30% that are saying no, but they're not doing anything about it. So when I first got here a few weeks ago, my mother and I hung up signs on both sides of the highway to, the entrance to our community. And we hung up signs that said, say no to NWMO. We hung them up about 9 p.m. at night. The next morning by 8 a.m., someone had ripped them down already. So we're having these basically like watchdogs in the community, trying their best to ensure that everyone is complying or everyone is agreeing. And the more that we disagree and the more uncomfortable that we make people, the harder it's going to be. And, now we have these helicopters flying around that belong to that NWMO that are searching for where on the land they can put this depository. So they're entering our airspaces without any consultation, without receiving any consent from even the chief and council here. They're just basically claiming the airspace above our community as their own to search for a place on where to put the depository.
When they present all of the good stuff about what they're wanting to do, are they also giving you examples of where they've done this before and show the long-term health effects of the communities around them?
It hasn't been done anywhere before. This is the first time. They were trying to do it in the Yucca Mountains down in, I think it's Arizona, and Arizona declined. The indigenous communities down there declined the depository.
Good.
So this is the area where it's the first time it would be happening. It's the first time it would be going through. And they had a depository, in Fukushima in Japan.
Yeah,
that's where a depository was as well. And you know how everything happened over there, and all the nuclear waste that's spilling out into the ocean over there, and
it's
the cleanup
stores.
Exactly. And the fact that people are agreeing here is terrifying. It's like, what's going to happen to my children or my grandchildren? They're not going to have any moose to hunt, any fish to fish for. Nothing's going to be healthy for them anymore.
Well, see, and that's already started with all these tar sands and the fracking and stuff, because of all that's getting into the water supply. And
exactly.
The fish are actually bleeding out of the gills. The other wildlife comes and drinks from the water. They're finding dead deer and other wildlife with big sores and blisters. The vegetation isn't growing. And
exactly.
And people, it amazes me how ignorant people can be. Like, if it's not in their area, they don't think it's happening, but it's affecting everyone.
Exactly.
Everyone, and that's what's going to get humanity if it isn't stopped.
Exactly.
Being in Canada, is there is Harper's government approaching Indigenous people there any better than they were during the beginning of Idle No More, or is it still just going along with the paper genocide of the tribal lands and the resources and all of that?
I think it's pretty similar. They're just getting better at how they're wording things and how they're making statements to the general public. So they've gotten sneakier with their word choices for, media releases and press releases and that kind of thing.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
But I think the benefit of Idle No More was not specifically targeted towards the government structures and systems, but towards the general public in Canada. So I think that's kind of shifted people's mindsets and mind frames on the relationship between Indigenous peoples and non-Indigenous peoples.
Well, I know. In Canada, your leadership, your Indigenous leadership, is a little different here than here. I mean, because you have your tribal leaders and your nation's leaders, but then you have another set. And I could be dead wrong on this in explaining it, but it's like a government level of international chiefs. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's so Canada has Assembly of First Nations have a national chief who is basically like the Indigenous version of the Prime Minister of Canada. But they are not taken nearly as seriously as the Prime Minister. It's basically a token position. That's how I feel about it personally. I used to be really involved with the Assembly of First Nations and all the work that they were doing on the national level in the fight against the federal government. But you really see how much they also follow the federal government, because they're the ones who are funding the Assembly of First Nations. So that in itself shows that they're obviously going to follow what the federal government says no matter what.
So in other words, they're supposed to be there defending the rights and the treaty rights and the treaty lands, but they're not really doing it as
exactly
they could be because they're being paid off.
Yeah, and I also think that because the treaty relationship was a nation-to-nation basis, that's what it was fundamentally based upon. Yet now they're trying to discuss treaties between, the federal government and the AFN national chiefs, and that itself is not a nation-to-nation relationship. The nation-to-nation relationship itself would be, separate nations. So whether it's Anishinaabe or whether it's those in Treaty 6 territory and between the Crown, that was what it was primarily based upon. And the fact that AFN is trying to get involved in treaty discussions and treaty dialogue is showing how watered down treaty has become within Canada specifically.
Are these I'm going to call them federal chiefs? I don't know.
Mm-hmm. That's a good concept. We a lot of us call them career chiefs.
Oh, career chiefs. My question is, are these chiefs at all elected or by the Indigenous people at all, or are they handpicked from the government?
No, they're picked by the Indigenous people. So, within my community, we have a chief and council who are voted in by the people every 2 years. But the issue is that for the local communities, a lot of them is, there's it's family. There's 60 people on reserve, 40 people are from one family, 30 are from the other. It depends on how much family you have that are old enough to vote to get in as chief and council.
Geez, and it's going to tell me that you guys have nepotism up there too, huh?
Yeah, it gets pretty bad sometimes, and it's the same with with the national chief gets voted in by all the chiefs in Canada, but a lot of it also has to do with that person who's running their connections and what kind of face they're putting in public. It's a political facade, basically.
Well, I know that there's been.
I think that's very detrimental because
go ahead.
If you look at, if you look at traditional chiefs, we had a head chief and a war chief, and the head chief was the spokesperson, so they went to the people and asked them, what they wanted and what they needed, and the war chief today it would be the political fighter. But back then it was the one who really fought for the lives of the people, the defender of the community, the defender of the woman, the defender of the children. Now you don't have it. It's all been lost and erased within this colonial concept of what a chief is. And I think that in itself is again one of the main issues on why our people are the way they are right now. Our communities are really struggling between these big corporations, because we have these chiefs who have lost the meaning and teaching behind being a real chief. It's a colonial chief now. We lost the sense of a traditional chief in our communities.
And that's really sad. I know when we were at the last permanent forum, there was a very young guy there. I think his name was Daniel something. Mm-hmm. And I was very impressed with this young man, and I think he's going to be a very good leader. Mm-hmm. But the thing is, we don't have the leadership, and this is amongst our tribes on the central part of Turtle Island as well. Today, we don't have the leaders that are brought up with the traditional teachings of what a real chief is, of what a real leader is, and this is what we need to get back to.
Exactly.
The thing is that the governments of the world are really controlled by 6 corporations, and they are trying to negate our indigenous people's rights to what land holdings that we have out by treaty. And to think that Harper did this with just a swipe of a pen, and there was really nothing at that level of government to stop him, is just mind-boggling to me.
Mm-hmm.
And when it was approached to the Crown in England, I think the answer was that the Prime Minister, Stephen Harper himself, was their representative. Do I get that right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to make sure I've got all the facts right because I don't want to be putting out any nonsense here.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that's, we need to get back to the way it was before we had the government and then and Christianity divide and conquer our people. We have to get back to that way of thinking, because the sad thing about that division, and especially the government's part, is that our people here bought into that.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where we went wrong, and we need to come out of that way of thinking, because I know here on the state side we have federally recognized tribes and state recognized tribes, and then you have just the same amount of number of federally recognized tribes, probably more, that are just as qualified to be federally recognized but are not.
Mm-hmm.
And this, to me, is wrong. And I think that whole federal recognition thing should just be stopped. Or, if you are going to be federally recognized, then all tribes should be federally recognized. And there's, that's the way it should be. If you can prove you're indigenous, and there's not a doubt, then everyone should have the same rights.
I agree, and I think that in itself also is another issue when it comes to being defined and how we allow ourselves to be defined by, the colonizer. So if I went up to you and I said, hey, can I define you? Do I have a right as Andrea Landry to define who you are? The obvious answer would be no, because I know nothing about you. I know nothing about how you live and how you are. And in reality, it's up to us how we define ourselves. As Indigenous peoples, the only people who have a right to define us are ourselves as Indigenous peoples. And
exactly.
It's gotten to a point where we say, okay, well, we have status cards here in Canada, and it defines you as Indian under the Indian Act, under the federal government. Well,
I would rather have another Indigenous person make that judgment than someone who's not Indigenous.
People say, oh, I'm Indian.
Now, do you all have the blood quantum thing up there in Canada? Her connection keeps going in and out.
Okay, I'm back. Sorry.
Okay. I was thinking, do your people have the blood quantum thing going on up there?
No, thankfully we don't. It's go through customs down in the States, so they ask for quantum letters, but we don't have to have them as, Canadian Indigenous peoples. But I think that's all leads up to, the same issue of who do we allow to define us?
Yes, exactly.
And, we have to overcome that hurdle of allowing colonial governments. It shouldn't have to be that way. And if we want to, fight that fight, then we have to recognize that only we as Indigenous peoples can define ourselves. And it shouldn't matter what the federal government says. Yes, we receive rights from the federal government. But in actuality, we have to begin receiving those rights from ourselves, from who we are as Indigenous peoples. And I think that's a struggle within the UN system as well. It's the same fighting for recognition as Indigenous peoples. So you see that fight everywhere, and that pattern has to stop. That pattern of allowing colonial dictatorships to define us has to be put to an end, or else it's going to continue until they define us as being non-Indigenous. Until it comes to a point in time where we'll lose all our rights because we've allowed them to define us so much.
Exactly. Now, Doreen's people had the tenacity to rebuke that, because Doreen, and you correct me if I'm wrong, they tried to pull that blood quantum thing in New Zealand, and it was on a census poll.
On our census, our national census, and of course we just didn't respond to it. The majority of us didn't.
People just ignored it. I thought that was so cool. Like, why didn't our people do it?
Well, it just seems so stupid. You just need to look at us to know that we're Indigenous to here. We don't ever think of ourselves as 3/4 Māori or half Māori, because one of our parents might be a Pākehā or white. We never look at it like that. If you're born with Māori blood, you're Māori, and that's just how it is.
And that's the way it was with our people too.
1/8 or 1/16 wasn't in our radar to do that. So as a result, they chucked it out. They took it off the census.
Yeah. Well, see, that's the way it was with us traditionally too. And what it's done, it's turned people away from ceremony, from learning their culture and things. Because, I was kind of protected when I was younger. I never heard until I got older one of our people say to another one of our people, "I'm more than you are," and I'm going, okay, what's that about? Because our people were never like, and of course it was a government device thing that they thought they would get our land after 2 or 3 generations because we wouldn't have enough blood quantum, quote unquote, to actually say that's who we were. But like for right now, at least I can here in the States, you have a lot of tribes that are petitioning for that federal recognition. And it can take anywhere from 20 to 50 to 60 to 100 years to get that. The tribes that are federally recognized don't want any other tribes to be federally recognized because they're afraid it's going to dip into the funding that they're getting from the government. Now, I'm an individual that's 7/8 Indigenous and 1/8 French. But the Frenchman was raised Native, and we don't know anything about that. But because I'm not on the proper tribal enrollment, isn't, our particular family can't be enrolled, with a federal tribe. Now, all of our other relatives, because we have about 10 different tribes married into our family, most of our family is federally recognized. So we know what's going on at that level. We understand the qualifications and stuff. My dad even helped the Coeur d'Alene Reserve get their federal recognition. But it's this division of the people and our own people buying into it that's not right. We should be reaching out to our people instead of pointing the finger. And I think that's going to give us more of a vote, number one, and accomplishing the things that we need to do for our people as a group. And I'm all for all tribes unifying and helping together and keeping our individual identity. And a matter of fact, in our organization that Doreen and I have founded, the slogan is Tribes Helping Tribes. And it's just to get our people to turn around and start thinking Indigenous, even if it's, a little bit at a time. I think this is going to be our saving grace, not only for the welfare of our people, but for all people involved. Okay, I was expecting an opinion on that. And it just stopped. Okay.
We agree, Master.
So I'm supposed to keep talking? Okay. No.
No, I'm just getting back to being a registered tribal member, and that's a federal government recognition, is that right? And a non-registered. Like, if you just didn't accept or recognise the federal government and the registration there, what would happen? Right, because if you're not registered, you're still Indigenous. No one can take away from you. It's your birthright.
Exactly.
So what would if you didn't register?
Well, actually, a couple of years ago, and I haven't heard much about it since, some of the federally recognized tribes were actually thinking of dropping their federal recognition and letting that go. But I think the problem would be with that would be especially with our children who have become dependent on that government subsidy. We call them IR checks here. Indian relief checks is what we call them. And these are the tribes and the reservations that have casinos would not. Well, if they lost their federal status, they would then lose their casinos, of course. Mm-hmm. And the casinos, the reservations that do have casinos get per capita that help the enrolled members with their expenses and living. So it's kind of a catch-22. It's like how can we break this and still maintain our people at a comfortable level, you know?
Yeah. I think time, you know, it feels not necessarily go back, but how do we move forward as Indigenous peoples without, you know, the quote-unquote help of the federal government? Because now we've gotten to these kinds of situations where we're heavily reliant on this kind of violent relationship with the federal government in order to survive, you know, in order to eat, in order to clothe our children, in order to, you know, that kind of thing, to survive. And it's like, where do we draw the line? How do we draw the line when many of our people are having a difficult time surviving? So I think it's, sometimes I feel like it's too far gone, but at the same time, you know, we see a lot of people doing this amazing work, and I think a lot of it comes down to reconciliation. Exactly. You know, and when people talk about reconciliation, they tend to think about reconciliation, you know, with the federal government or with the church system when it comes to residential schools or, you know, that kind of thing. But I think what reconciliation really means is reconciliation with ourselves, you know, with ourselves as individuals and with ourselves and our communities as Indigenous.
That's exactly right. We're going to send you an antenna. Poor thing.
Almost late. But she's right, hey, Marcy?
Exactly. She's right on it. We have to reconcile amongst ourselves before we can reconcile anywhere else. And to me, the reconciliation would entail our people like dumping this whole system that's in place right now, where our, you know, this whole quantum thing, where, like I said, people are saying I'm more native than you are type of thing, where we embrace all of our people, whether they have as much quote-unquote blood quantum or not, and bring them in and educate. So that's what reconciliation is to me, where we don't let that government set up of quantum, you know, for one, dictate who we are. Our people should, you know, do this reconciliation and just get rid of that altogether. And I think there, you know, there'd be more work because we have to teach more people. But I know I get that all the time. You know, especially people who are looking up their lineage and stuff like that, especially with our tribe. You know, I try to help as much as I can. But that's
the thing with us here, though, Marcy. It starts with you. Only we can make a difference for ourselves. And, you know, we look at ourselves, just for me, say, look at myself. Then I've got 2 daughters. Then I'll filter it out to my daughters and then just let it ripple out slowly to make a difference. To make a stand. I think you can only do it in a small way like that, where it filters or ripples out. Because it's really hard to do the big picture straight away.
Well, I didn't think it was going to happen overnight, Doreen, where, oh yeah, let's pass this, where everybody just drops that. But
no, but some of our leaders tend to look at that big picture instead of bringing it back down and then going from the ground up. Because it does start with yourself, your family.
Right.
For us, it's our hu, which is our sub-tribe, before we'd even look at a iwi or a bigger tribal group or even a nation.
Mm-hmm.
But some of them want to go straight to the other end. And it's just way too hard to do something, because you end up generalising of, well, this will be the well-being for all of us, but it doesn't work like that when we're communally based.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I meant, sorry.
Yeah.
Can I add something to that?
Sure.
Sorry, my connection keeps on cutting in and out. I want to apologize, but what I want to add to that is when you look at, for example, you look at the other side of the picture. So the residential schools in Canada, for example, they were meant to kill the Indian in the child, to assimilate young Indigenous children in Canada to become basically white. So they were, punished for speaking their language. They were sexually, emotionally, physically, and spiritually abused. And basically when they came out of those schools, they came out as individuals who are hurt and who didn't want to be Indian anymore, who didn't want to be Anishinaabe anymore. And what the federal government did when they did that was they worked on the individual. They worked on those young children from the ages of 2 and 3 years old all the way up till they were 18 years old. And they chipped away at them every day until they felt that they knew they didn't want to be Indian anymore. So if you flip that, and you take young children, the ages of even 3 or 4, as individuals, and you work with them every day to totally embrace who they are as an Anishinaabe or as a Cree or as a Chippewa, from the ages of 3 till 18, the most fundamental years of their lives, and you fully allow them to embrace themselves as an Indigenous person, then that's when I think we'll really start to see that change happening. We'll begin to see that shift of younger generations fully embracing it and wanting to be who they are, wanting to be Indigenous, wanting to be Anishinaabe. So when you look at how the federal government did it, they had that tactic, but it's also up to us to switch that over and really begin working with the younger generations, the younger children, and allow them to recognize their potential as Indigenous peoples, even if they are 2 or 3 years old, because that's the most fundamental years of their lives. That's where they're going to learn pride. That's where they're going to learn how important it is to do ceremony, how important it is to speak their languages. So I think that would definitely benefit our people in our communities is working with those young children and those young teens, and also focusing on those who have been hurt. The older generations who are suffering with anger, with alcoholism, with drug abuse, with violence, and helping them work through those issues layer by layer by layer, because that shift and that change won't happen, even within 10 years. Sometimes it takes years and years and years for that shift to transpire and that shift to happen.
Right.
But I think the more that we work with the individual in a positive way, I think that will really be the change that we need for our people. That's what I think.
And you're absolutely right. Now, with that thought, my question is, at least here in the States, I don't know how it is in Canada, but we have a lot of our Indigenous people that are not living in tribal communities. They are now urban. Mm-hmm. I know most big cities have our Indigenous centers where people can go and have powwows and all sorts of activities and stuff like that. But it's a mix. You have like, well, I used to live in Chicago. We had a native population of 27,000, but it was a cross of all tribes across the country. Now, I wish we could get that type of communal teaching from elders and stuff to these peoples who don't have access to that. Mm-hmm. And that would be a real challenge, because you have like the people from the residential schools over in Canada. We had the same thing here called boarding schools. Those people that came out of there, it's affected their families for several generations, or for 2 or 3 generations. And these people are not able to teach their children because they weren't brought up with it. That's where they made the break. That's how the government was successful with that. So I'm trying to imagine a way to get these children back to a type of some sort of a community where these things can be taught. Do you have any ideas or views on that?
Here in Canada, we have the Friendship Center, so there's urban infrastructure targeted people in cities. And 60% of the Aboriginal population in Canada live in the city right now. 40% are only on reserve and 60% are in the cities.
Wow.
And it's those kinds of locations where our people can go and access those kinds of resources, culture, language, education. But I think that the missing link is self-help or caring for self. You can go to a counselor and you can touch on the surface, the very surface of the issues, but what we're neglecting is focusing on the core of those issues, the emotions behind those issues, and really breaking down those emotions. And I think that, in the city it is very, very difficult to reach our people, because a lot of them, whether they're struggling or whether they're highly successful focusing on their careers, a lot of them will be too busy to think about, healing. And I think that it's hard to say, but it's not up to us to reach out to those people. It's up to themselves to really want to heal and really want to learn to grow and evolve and make shifts in their lives. And I think that I used to really hold on to I want to help everyone, I want to help that family, I want to help this family, I want to change how that person thinks. And it was like that way I was just burning myself out to the core. I had nothing left, not even for myself. And I think it really came to me when I recognized, when I was 16 years old, I needed help. I was thinking about suicide. I was doing drugs and alcohol. I was not in a good situation at home, and the only way that I got help was when I reached out. Otherwise, I would have just kept on living the life I was living, and I wouldn't have made any changes in my life. But I forgot when I compared it to how I was when I was 16 years old, it was me as an individual who said, hey, I need help. I need to get to the core of my issues. I need to stop looking at the surface of what's going on in my life and begin to recognize, how do I reach that pride again as, a 16-year-old Anishinaabe Kwe living in the city? Surrounded by racism and violence and drug and alcohol abuse. And that's all it was. It was me as an individual who was gonna make that change. So I think that's how we have to begin looking at when we're helping people. Is they have to be the ones to come to the helper.
Right.
We can't help them unless they want that help.
Well, at least you had the foresight at a young age to have the sense to do that.
I think it was.
We have to take a break right now, Andrea.
Okay.
And we'll be on break for about 5 minutes, and then we'll return for the second half of our show with Andrea Landry.
Miigwech, thank you.
Okay, I guess we're back from break. I want to give our call-in number again, should anyone have any questions. That's area code 718-506-1564. Again, that's area code 718-506-1564. And you can also reach us via our webpage if you're listening in tonight. And that's justusradionetwork.com. I'm going to introduce my cousin, Charles Two Dog. In our language, it would be Gilita Li. And he has a question for you, Andrea.
Okay.
Andrea, Sigulli's kind of go, by the way. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Can you? Okay. I have a question, because we do on our show with my Mohawk sister a lot of stuff out of Canada, and one of the things I've heard, and I'm just curious. There was a representative for Prime Minister Harper. He had a French name. I can't exactly say his name. Said that the way to handle our Indian problem is to go to the women, which that bothers me quite a bit, Andrea.
Okay.
Are you having any, Harper's actually saying you're not Anishinaabe, you're not Cree, you're not Mohawk, you're Canadian. So he's not really looking nation to nation, is he?
No, he's not. And I think that in itself again is the challenge that we're facing.
We're hearing things about I've always stood for the women because you're the life givers of the people, and without you there would be no nations.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think that we see it trickling down to society where people say, well, why don't they just be Canadians? Why don't they just assimilate, and be like everyone else? Why do they get special rights? And as an Indigenous woman in Canada, there's over 1,000 missing and murdered Indigenous women, and a lot of these cases are left open, and a lot of these women aren't being found, and their stories aren't being shared, and they're left voiceless with their bodies along the highways of Canada. And there's no respect there. There's no, women are supposed to be seen as the integral foundation for Indigenous nations in Canada. We're meant to be the backbone of our nations. And when we live in cities, there's always that fear. There's always, when I was heavily involved in Isle More, I was receiving many threats from men specifically who said they were going to, rape and murder me. They were inboxing me on Facebook. They were messaging me on Twitter. They were finding my email address even and sending me derogatory photos of Indigenous women and saying this will be you next. And they're trying to ingrain that fear in us that if we continue speaking up, they'll kill us. And that's what many Indigenous women are facing who are standing up for their rights. And if you don't want to be Canadian, you might as well be dead is basically what they're saying. So I think that because the government is using that as a tactic, a tactic to destroy the pride in Indigenous women, that tactic is also being filtered into the masses. And I think that this issue instills that fear in Indigenous women to be silent. So when they're getting abused by their partner, when they're getting harassed by a coworker, or when they receive threats from a stranger in their email, they don't speak up. And this is where we begin to see those numbers increasing of missing and murdered Indigenous women in this country because they're not speaking up. So that's the reality. That's the scary reality of being an Indigenous woman in this country is that fear is constantly around you when you're not in your own community, when you're out in the city, when you're trying to live a everyday normal Canadian life per se, I guess, and just because the color of your skin or what you say even at a small rally, that trickles out and many people say, be careful what you say out there, be careful how you represent yourself, be careful on what you choose to discuss, and it shouldn't be that way. It shouldn't be that way for young women and older women. We should be allowed to speak up and be.
It shouldn't be that way at all.
Exactly.
It's one of the things. The reason I'm saying this, Andrea, is that I'm also a New York Mohawk, and I do a lot with Tracy Kennedy from another station out of Canada, my Mohawk sister. And we're reporting a lot of what Stephen Harper is saying to you guys. And what I'm understanding is the RCMP is raping Indigenous women over there and saying if you say anything, we'll come back and kill you. Well, that's like Nazism to me, that sounds like the SS.
Yeah, and it's a silencing tactic, and it's because what Harper is saying and doing and what the government is saying and doing that makes it okay for society to say and do the same things, and because the RCMP officers, there's many cases out there where RCMP officers take young Indigenous women from the streets of whether it's Vancouver or even Winnipeg, and they'll take them for starlight tours. So what that means is they'll take them out into the middle of the bush in minus 40 weather, they'll rape them and they'll abuse them and they'll throw their bodies in the cold. And that's where they'll die, along the highways or out in the back roads and along our highways.
Well,
And
thank you for answering that question, honey. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So it's definitely a struggle, but I think that we see our women still standing and still rising to continue that fight for sure. So miigwech, thank you.
See, the thing that's hard for us as Iroquois people, and his co-host on their show is Tracy Kennedy from Six Nations, and for our Iroquois people, we live in a matrilineal society. Mm-hmm. Everything goes through the women, and they have the power, especially what we call our beloved ones and our clan mothers can take out a chief. Mm-hmm. So it's hard for us to visualize a people that don't respect their women.
Yeah.
And the women have just as much power as the men, even more. I've been given something to read here, and this is by someone you know as well, Andrea, Ty Pelly.
Yeah, she's awesome.
And she has there's a statement, I guess, that she either posted or that she said herself, I'm not for sure, but it says, the right to self-determination begins with each and every single indigenous person. Mm-hmm. Many don't even know that is our right. As protected by international law, although governments have taken it upon themselves to determine who we are, we must educate.
Definitely.
Yeah. And that's exactly where it's going. What I was saying before break is that you said that you reached out when you were 16, I think.
Yeah.
And not many people at that age, at that young age, have enough sense to realize that they need to reach out. Mm-hmm. And so this is why we need groups within our, amongst our people that can at least offer the help, but it's up to that individual to take it.
Definitely, and also, during that process, I also went back to my old ways, and growing up in a family of violence and alcoholism and all that, I did get my healing when I was 16, but I went back into the violence and the alcoholism and the drug abuse again, and I think what it really took for me was hitting that rock bottom, that low point. So when I was 21, I went into a very abusive relationship. And I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that was normal for me. I didn't really see it as anything too bad because it's what our people were dealing with. It was what I grew up with. And being in that violent relationship, I was like, okay, it's fine. This is normal. This is okay. And only being 21 years old, and then again, I recognized that I had to get out of that. I had to break that cycle again because I fell right back into that cycle again, that pattern of normalizing violence and alcoholism and drug abuse. And I ended up leaving that partner, and I ended up, changing my number, changing my address, finding somewhere to live, and ensuring that I was safe. But obviously the RCMP didn't protect me because he ended up breaking into my home and raping me. And it was that night that I remember where I recognized that I truly did be a victim anymore, because the government had made me a victim so much that it became okay for me to be a victim. It became normal for me.
You kind of broke up a little bit there, Andrea. Did you?
Okay.
You were talking that you were raped?
Yeah, so my ex-boyfriend, after I broke up with him, I relocated. I tried to find a safe haven, and he found me and he raped me. And it was that evening, that night after that happened, where I recognized that I didn't want to live as a victim anymore. I didn't want to be a victim of violence. I didn't want to be a victim of rape. I didn't want to be a victim of drug and alcohol use. I wanted to be the proud Anishinaabe that I was born to be. And it was within that moment of hitting rock bottom where I made that change. I think that's a lot of our people, sadly, a lot of our people that are changing, they hit that rock bottom and they say, I don't want to be a victim anymore. I don't want to live this life anymore. So that's also the sad reality. A lot of our people have to hit that very, very low point before they recognize and realize, how powerful they are, and how they want to be. For myself, I wanted to be Anishinaabe. So that's what really changed my life for sure.
I think that's wonderful that you've taken that much control of your life. But of course, I'm very upset that you had to have that happen to you in order to do. Because for a lot of people that I don't think they really have any concept of what that's like to have your total worth trying to be taken away from you.
Exactly.
Mashu, if you allow me just 1 second.
Oh.
Andrea, one of the things that I've always done in my life is to fight for the women of our nations, of all nations, all of our nations. Women are the stronger of the two. Without the woman, there would be no me. There would be no nations whatsoever. And my heart broke just a minute ago. I don't want to hear. I don't want to see our women have to go through such a thing. And I honor you for the strength you have as an initiative woman, and that you can do what you do. And I bow to you right now, sweetie, and thank you so much.
Gee, your words were powerful too, dog. You knocked her right off the air.
Jeez.
But
that's what I wanted. I wanted to say that.
It's a strong person.
Thank you.
It takes a strong person to even talk about that. So you've gone through a lot of healing, and
definitely, I've done a lot of work on it. Before I was ashamed. I had held all that shame and fear and anger and anxiety. I had lots of anxiety attacks over it, but the more work I did, the deeper I went into it, I realized it was just a story of my life. It was just a small portion of who I am, and that's what it is for most women. It's just a small story, a small portion of their story, because there's so much more, and there's so much more potential in ourselves as Indigenous women, and even as Indigenous men, to surpass those stories and recognize that we are more than just those ugly, negative stories that are surrounding our lives.
Exactly, and we have to know those stories, but we have to pull away and look more at the positive stories to have a more positive self-image of ourselves.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's all about balance.
Yeah, and that's the only way we're going to be able to walk in balance.
Exactly.
Yeah, that encompasses that as well. Doreen, are you still with us?
Yes, I am. Thanks. And like to and yourself, Marcia, and even Jimmy, I thought, that's just so horrible for someone to have to go through. But what I'm seeing, like listening to you today, you've obviously worked on it, healed yourself. You've come out the other end stronger.
Exactly.
On a mission. You're on a mission.
Yeah, the mission for world domination.
Hey, But when our people, Indigenous people, dominate the world, it will not be the way it has been. I remember
exactly.
I remember up in New York, and I think it was the Seneca that got a whole community back. They were non-Indigenous in the community. They were white people, and they were so afraid that, oh my God, we're going to have the same thing happen to us that we did to them, our ancestors did to them. And they were quite surprised to find out that nothing changed. The Seneca people, tribal council says, we don't want to take your homes and to put you out or anything. You're just going to be paying for the same services, but instead of going through the state government, you'll be going through tribal government. And everything the same, and it was a better situation. And they actually found that they were actually living better than they were under the state government at that time. And this was like probably at least 10 years ago, maybe longer. But because our people have been through so much, I like to think that we would not put another people through that.
Definitely. I don't think that the oppressed will ever try to oppress the oppressors. I think we've we've learned from our own experiences that it's important that we don't stoop to that level, you know, and that the concept of world domination, you know, you look at it in a colonial sense and it's filled with genocide, you know, and if we were to quote unquote dominate the world, and in reality it would basically be just us trying to allow ourselves to survive, because, you know, without us the land would survive easily, you know, and that's the reality, and it's up to us to really just cradle the land, you know, and embody the land and heal. And I think indigenous world domination is truly about healing and reconciliation.
Exactly. This has been what was it when they said that the end of the world was coming and all of that. Our people have prophecies, and I'm sure all tribes have the prophecies. They were going by the Aztec calendar, I think it was, that was being misread. And it wasn't the end of the world. What it was is that there was going to be a change. And I spoke on this in New Zealand when I was at one of the maraes, you know, talking about the prophecy of our people, and that we as indigenous people are the change. We are the ones that are going to bring our earth, because we are the caretakers of the earth for our children. We say we look to at least 7 generations ahead, and that we're just here hopefully making sure that the earth is in a better way to pass on to them than what we found it. Well, in these hard times, especially with everyone trying to destroy our life source, you know, that's a big job. So the thing is, and I think the one good thing that really came out of Idle No More was that it opened the eyes of a lot of non-indigenous people that are supporting indigenous people, you know, because I heard in the beginning, and you know how people can be, oh, those Indians are fighting for those rights again. Well, yeah, we're fighting for rights, but in that process, we're also saving all of humanity, and that's what people were learning at that time. Because without water, nothing lives.
Exactly.
And that affects all of humanity.
Yeah, it's true. I think that's the beauty of you know, being indigenous peoples as a collective. The unification of indigenous peoples will be the ones to save the world. And I think that's the truth.
Now, I've got a question for you, and this is one that it's a strategic question. And I know you're going to have the answer. And this answer will be heard all over the world. No pressure, eh?
No.
When I was in New Zealand, I was always talking about Idle No More, and there was very good coverage in New Zealand. And like I said before, Doreen and I kind of became the voice of Idle No More in New Zealand, and whereas in Canada, you had the flash mob round dances.
Yeah.
They had the flash mob hakas.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And so we're hearing all this, and I was there for 3 months the last time I was there, and Doreen made me go from all over New Zealand speaking on our culture and traditions, and Idle No More. She held a gun to my head. It was. Are you feeling sorry for me yet?
It's crazy.
Yeah, no. But the thing is that I came back, you know, stateside, and I'm expecting our native communities down here. I was in Alabama at the time with our people in our community, and I came back ready to see, you know, where the Idle No More rallies were, the flash mob dances and stuff like that, and I came back and started talking, you know, with our family and some of the people in the community, and they go, "What's that?" And that's because of mainstream media, and they didn't know what it was. Now, a few months after I was there was I know you were in on one too, Dog. and there were several.
Yeah, I was in one.
But not many throughout the country, and I was just going, how can our people? I mean, you know how we Indians are. If you tell somebody and it's all over.
Yeah.
You know, it spreads. Everybody, it's moccasin telegraph is what we call it. I mean, everybody knows. And I was just surprised how that didn't get around. Especially down here.
Yeah.
Well, Mashu, I went to one of the flash round dances that we supported Idle No More with in Tennessee, and when we got there, we were told that if we did it, we'd be arrested. We did it anyway.
But I think in Canada, even the real big ones, did you all go through any procedure like getting permits, or did you just show up?
Yeah, when I organized the rallies that I did, I organized about 6 rallies across Canada, and every time I had to get permission from the RCMP, from the city, whatever city I was in, and when we held it on Parliament Hill, I had to get permission from Parliament Hill. So it was quite a long process, but the more that were popping up, the faster the permission would go through. But the struggle there, you know, a lot of it was on Indigenous territory, was on treaty territory, you know, and the fact that we had to gain permission from our treaty partner was kind of a slap in the face. So I think that it was like, okay, so I have to have your permission to be on this land, yet you don't have to have our permission to be on this land, you know. And there was lots of difficulties with our CMP officers and even, you know, everyday people coming in, you know, trying to cross through, you know, whether we were blocking bridges or whatever with their cars. So there was lots of anger, lots of frustration, lots of rage, and you that's when the ugly face of racism was really shown, was during that peak of I Don't Know More.
Yeah, I was posting everything I could get on the internet here through all the sites that I'm on, putting the word out about there for support for you guys.
Mhm.
Now, has anything been done positively to maintain the treaty land? Is there anything on the part of Harper's government that's doing anything about that to remedy the situation? Because initially what we got here on stateside was that he basically did a paper genocide.
Mhm.
You are no more indigenous, or you use the term aboriginal up there.
Mhm.
And you had no more treaty lands or guaranteed your tribal natural resource rights. Has that fought, and is there any progress in maintaining that? Have we lost her again? Yeah, we just dropped her.
Still coming back.
Yeah, she's coming back.
If you allow me, Mashu, what I would like to say though is that if we allow the Anishinaabe and all the nations to have their spiritual ways, their traditions, keep them for Christ, you know, for all sakes, keep them, but be able to sit with each other, start talking and working with each other as far as unity itself. We need to all keep our own traditions, yes, and our own ways, own values, but start talking with each other to unify. I mean, our nations we have it's big country here. It's hard to get everybody together, but unity is the main thing, you know, for all of us, is to come together and unify.
You're absolutely right, but that has to start within your own community. That has to start within your family, and then your community, and then your clan. I mean, it's something that has to start right at the core. Excuse me, Andrea, did you hear my question?
Yeah, I did. Sorry, I was saying that the treaty relationship hasn't changed since treaties been established, but now that we have this really terrible dictatorship government who's basically trying to, as you said, paper genocide. They're trying to eradicate all of our rights, and what they've begun doing is they've begun using sneakier words and sneakier phraseology to really exterminate our rights. So, for example, out here in my community, there's obviously under the Canadian Constitution Act, Section 35, in order for organizations and corporations to come in, they have to have consent from Aboriginal groups, right?
Right.
But what they have done is they begin talking to Métis people, and they begin receiving consent from Métis people. So when we say, well, we didn't allow you the right to use our land for that purpose, they'll say, yeah, we spoke to an Aboriginal group in your area. And we say, who? And they say, we spoke to one Métis person. And they're becoming very sneaky in how they're getting around and jumping through the hoops that are, within treaty or within, the Canadian Constitution Act in itself, Section 35, which focuses on Aboriginal rights, is a complete disgrace to treaty. It completely waters down and disregards treaty in itself. And what the federal government is trying to do is they're trying to negate treaty. They're trying to totally neglect everything that was ever endorsed in treaty. And, they're neglecting the oral conversations that took place when the treaty discussions were in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And they're just focusing on the paper form. And when you look at the paper form historically, our people didn't speak English fluently, and all those documents are in English.
Right.
So when those documents were signed, our people didn't fully understand what they were signing on to. And all the reason why they signed on was because they were starving and had food. So you see that they were placed in such a difficult situation where it was either life or death if they signed these papers. And I think that, the federal government, recognizes, I honestly don't think they recognize treaty, but they can't do anything about, not withholding treaty. And I think that's what our people are fighting for right now is our treaty rates. Our basic treaty rates are not being, honored at all. Treaty is completely dishonored by the federal government. So Idle and War did bring treaty rates into view, but a lot of people living in the cities across Canada, specifically Canadians, the non-Indigenous populations, don't even know which treaty territories they're in.
Right.
And that in itself is an issue. They don't know the real history of the land that their homes are based upon. They don't understand that the political challenges and barriers that are occurring within their homelands, because all they're thinking about is, how they're going to make a dollar. Yet we have our people in our communities struggling to fight for their treaty rights and struggling to fight for their basic rights as Indigenous peoples, and they're not getting that at all. But as you guys were saying, it's really about, getting together with your community and having these kinds of dialogues and discussions and really becoming aware of what's going on in the greater picture.
And, of course, they're not being accurately told about in the history books, because it's like here, the stuff that they have in our history books here in the U.S. is absolutely nonsense when it comes to the history.
Yeah.
Now, my question is, I don't know how the treaties are in Canada. I'm assuming they would be similar to our treaties here on the state side of the border. But our treaties, you have two kinds of treaties. You have treaties of conquest and treaties of benefit. Mm-hmm. Treaties of conquest is, okay, I have conquered you, therefore you will do this and you will do that. Mm. A treaty of benefit is that we will let you do this if you will allow us to do this, whatever it is. The one thing that's helped us with our treaty is that every one of our treaties here on the state side were treaties of benefit, opposed to treaties of conquest, which makes it that the federal courts uphold them. Now, are your treaties the same types of treaties up there in Canada?
I think they're faced as treaties of benefit, but the underlying concept was treaties of conquest, because we really had no choice. It was either life or death if we signed those or not.
Yeah.
They killed, in the plains, they killed our way of life. They killed our survival. That's what they did.
Right.
And if we didn't sign those treaties, what would we have? But the main concept of treaties in Canada was treaties of friendship, peace and friendship. That's what they were about. It was sharing, land sharing, resource sharing. It was basically sharing. And you look at some of the stronger treaties, like Treaty 6 is probably the most fundamental treaty in Canada. That's in the prairies, the Saskatchewan area.
Okay.
And I don't know a lot about it. I just know the basics of it. So I wouldn't be the person to speak upon Treaty 6 or even treaties in general. I know the background history of the treaty here, Robinson Superior Treaty, that my community is based under. But I know a lot of the time, they were based on peace and friendship and land and ensuring that people had the right to survive, basically. But the under surface is conquest. They came here to destroy the people to ensure that they got the land, right?
Right.
And I think that, most Canadians don't understand treaties. Most people don't understand treaties because and people when it comes to treaty.
Do you have your a lot of attorneys up there within the last few years? Do you see a larger number of Indigenous people going into Indigenous law to help fight for these treaties?
Definitely, but I think that other issue, because when they go into Indigenous law, the Indigenous law in itself, like the law of the land or fighting for Indigenous rights is basically swept under the rug when they're following Canadian law. So entering the legal system as an Indigenous lawyer, a lot of Indigenous lawyers feel that struggle of they have to follow Canadian law, but they're there to fight for their people. But how can you fight for their people when they're utilizing a law that was meant to kill our people? So we do have a lot of Indigenous lawyers trying to fight the good fight, but I know that a lot of them feel really confused and they're struggling. But we do have a lot of good lawyers out there doing some really great work for communities.
It's kind of like an uphill battle. I know that we have. I'm trying to think of the number of treaties we have. I want to say 576 treaties.
Mm-hmm.
I could be wrong, but the thing is that not one of these treaties that were made with our individual tribes throughout our part of Turtle Island here was ever dropped by our people. Our people always honored them.
Mm-hmm.
It was always the United States government that broke every treaty.
Yep, that's how it is here too.
Yeah. Now, you go to New Zealand, and they've only had one treaty.
Yeah.
And that's the Treaty of... I actually did a live broadcast of a show just like this because Doreen and I were the roving reporters for another radio show hosted by my cousin and Tracy Kennedy called Welcome to the Heart Drum. And we actually did a 2-hour show with people in Waitangi when they were there. The people were gathering about that treaty.
Well, Waitangi is the area where the treaty was signed in 1840. Mm-hmm. And Marcia and I were lucky enough to be able to go up there and do a live broadcast with Two Dogs and Tracy, and then just talk about the feelings, how our people feel about it today. Well, that was 2012 when we did that.
Yeah.
So that was great. But we've only got one treaty, and then I listened to other nations that have many treaties. And I think, the reason I think we're going to keep our treaty and keep fighting for it is because it clearly identifies that we did not give up our tino rangatiratanga, our sovereignty.
Mm-hmm.
We did not give up our tribal resources and way of life. So that's clear in the treaty. And we'll always fight and make sure that we keep that alive. Because I guess the alternative for us may be, if we didn't have it, then we'll just all be New Zealanders. And they probably wouldn't even recognise us as Indigenous.
I think the thing that kind of bothers me here on Turtle Island is that we'll hear a federally recognized tribe talk about their sovereignty. And the thing is that in order for you to be federally recognized, you are still following the laws and the rules of another government.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're doing that, you're not really sovereign, are you?
Yeah.
And a lot of our people get confused with that. Well, we are our own people. We have our tribal sovereignty because we can do this and do this. Yeah, but those are by the rules of an invading government. So you're not sovereign at all. And it's really hard for, I don't think a lot of our indigenous people understand that.
Yeah.
If sovereignty is given by a foreign governmental entity, then how is it sovereign? How are you sovereign as a people? You know, if it's given to you, if you're allowing someone else to give you sovereignty, that sovereignty should always be there no matter what. You know, it's within you. So it's definitely a challenge as well.
Exactly. And when I become chief of the world, I wouldn't hold your breath on that. I can't even take care of myself sometimes. That's
And you admitted that on live radio.
That's because I am a truthful and an honest man. I know my capabilities and my limitations.
Mind you, I think you know me by now, brother, cousin, is that only thing I would like in this world is for the Anishinaabe to keep their culture and keep everything alive there, and I'll do anything I can for the Anishinaabe. And I'd like, from all indigenous people all over the world, is that we fight to keep our spirituality and who we are, and I'll do anything for the Anishinaabe I can do.
Very good.
That's what, the three of us are doing by going to the UN and working with all indigenous peoples, because that's what we're trying to get done, is it not?
Yeah, just trying to fight the good fight for our people and ensure that our rights are there.
Yeah. I don't know. I got kind of scared the last time I was there. This tribe from up in Russia, in Siberia, wanted to take me back with them, and it's cold up there. We're Southern Indians. I said, I want one of those big seal coats.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it hadn't been very hard. It hadn't been very easy on me in my childhood either. But I do what I can.
Yeah, I think we all have our own personal challenges that we go through being indigenous. And hang on just a minute. Hello.
Hello.
Are we still here? We're doing our show.
Hang on just a minute.
Like in the living room? Into the kitchen?
Turn the light on. Okay. We all go through our personal trials and tribulations being indigenous. I think the severity of it depends on where we were or where we're growing up. So I personally understand a lot of the same things, let's say, that Andrea has experienced, because I wasn't always in a tribal situation. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I didn't have my community around me all the time. I have gone back to my community. I have traveled. I've traveled around the world. I lecture on my people and our culture around the world. And so I know that I, as an indigenous American, have been more privileged than a lot of our people. And I never, ever forget that. We were always taught as children by my grandparents and my great aunt and uncle that when we leave the house, and I'm nobody. I have no title. I have no position. I have no wealth. I'm just Mashu. What you see is what you get. But we are always representatives of our people. This is something that I was taught from a young child. And you always go out, and no matter what you do or how you act, other people are looking at you and judging all of your people by your Now,
very true.
That is human nature, right or wrong. That's human nature. So when I go out in public, and this is the way I was brought up, I'm always dressed traditional. I mean, I'm always wearing ribbon shirt. I'm a retired healthcare professional of 45 years. I've worked Indian education for 20 years, but I've always been dressed traditional from the waist up. I don't wear my jeans and mocks in public unless I'm at ceremony or a powwow or something. And it's not to get attention. That's just who I am. That's how I was brought up, and inadvertently it also tells people we are still here. We are not going anyplace. I remember working as an indigenous counselor at a college. Other indigenous people there were actually kind of putting me down because I still dress traditional. And it was the foreign counselors and stuff, like from India, who still dress in their saris and their traditional clothes, and people from other countries that back me up. And I'm thinking, okay, this is just backwards. You know, I am the only frickin' person here that's dressing truly American. And why don't I have the support of my people? Even though we're, different tribes. And, and that always struck me as kind of funny. But on the other hand, I noticed when my late wife and I had married into the hereditary chieftain of the Ho-Chunk Nation, and we had moved to Chicago, and she always dressed traditional. And we noticed within about 3 or 4 weeks after moving there, a lot of our people started, it was like an everyday thing to wear their ribbon shirts to work and, for every day and stuff like this. And the only statement is that we know who we are. And we were becoming more visible. But that isn't the reason that I do it. This is the way I've always dressed, except for when I was in the military, single-handedly winning the war in Vietnam. Oh, that's another story.
Well, what's up? But Mashu, everyone needs people like you. Like our people need people like you that are proud to wear your traditional regalia, or your tamuk or your traditional tattoos. We need that, and we need to see it visibly. But I think for us, it tells us that we're still alive, we're thriving, we're proud to be Maori people and tribal people.
The thing that I got surprised about, I've had more non-indigenous people actually say to me, "We're so proud that you carry on your culture and you're proud of who you are." I don't think I've ever heard an indigenous person tell me that, And I thought, okay, now this is just backwards. What's wrong with our people?
Yes, but remember how we are as indigenous people. We don't necessarily say it, but it's there. That we are proud.
I understand that, and I understand that more in a tribal community thing. I'm working at a college that's more non-native, or what we call Yoneg or Yonega. And but I mean, I wasn't scarred by it or anything. It's just something I go, gee, now isn't this backwards? But I think it's important that I've always tried to live my life where I show the young people, the little ones growing up, even school age and on up, that as a traditional Cherokee person or indigenous person, I can still survive in a non-indigenous world and not give up anything being indigenous.
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, I like to think I've been a good example of that, but this is what we need to give our children, that you don't have to give up anything being indigenous in order to survive in a white man's world. On the other hand, being indigenous, I can take what I consider good from this other culture that's in our country and embrace it, and I can throw the rest away as garbage. And that's how I've always tried to live by live my life by. And I've made it this far. I see that we have about 6 minutes left. I don't know if we'll have time or not, but our call-in number is 718-506-1564. Again, that's 718-506-1564. And then we have, it's possible for you to go to our website and leave a message there. There's a chat place for comments, and Jimmy can pass that on to us. Doreen, do you have any things you'd like to say, questions or?
Well, I'd still like to, I guess, because we're getting towards the end, just pick up again on what Ty Pelly had mentioned. It's about education. And for me, my family and my hapu, my sub-tribe and tribe, that was something that was ingrained in us growing up. And when we were little, we always went to our traditional homes, looked at our carvings, learnt the stories about the carvings, learnt the songs that went with them, learnt all the protocols around our traditional homes, our past sites. So, I think it gave me a really, really good, strong base to be able to share what I've learned over the years. I come from a family of 9. Mum and Dad always pushed us to educate ourselves in the mainstream system, and then we had to go on weekends and help renovate our traditional homes and that. So I feel like we got a good balance growing up, and it's taken us through to adulthood and to our careers. Our careers have always been in education, health, and the social sectors. The political arena, you can't help but get involved in that because it touches us in every part of our lives growing up. So just in line with what Ty Pelly was saying, I think education is the key. If we've had the opportunity to educate ourselves, then it's our responsibility to share it with others so that we make a better world or a better place for our families and our sub-tribes and our tribes, and then it filters out. That's all.
That's all. No, that's good though.
I don't put it all in.
Andrea, will you have any closing words for our program tonight?
No, I just wanted to say miigwech for having me and miigwech for giving me the space to share my perspective and my story, because a lot of these perspectives are my own, and a lot of the perspectives that I share come from myself, so I don't want people thinking, oh, that's what all Canadian Indigenous people think. It's really comes from my own mind, and I really appreciate all the work that all you do and all that everyone in this call does for the fight for Indigenous rights, and I think that it's a fight that we have to keep on fighting. So miigwech for having me, and I really look forward to continuing these kinds of conversations and dialogue in the future. Miigwech, thank you.
We would love to have you back on the show sometime.
Yeah, definitely.
Great, and I think with this show, I've said this before. This is a medium that reaches out to the world, and this is where we, as in us in particular, as Indigenous people, have the ability to reach out and tell our story all over the world, because mass media doesn't cover what's going on in Indian country.
Mhm.
And this is why I love this modern technology, because it gives us the avenue to do that, and I think we reach more people a lot of times than what mass media does. And I'd like to thank you, Miigwech, coming in. Our word is ski, for thank you, for being tonight. And you've just given us a lot of really, really good information.
Awesome.
And insight into what's going on in Canada and what you're working, and what we three as a team in our different avenues can do, through the United Nations.
Mhm.
Cuz, Two Dogs, do you have anything to say in closing?
I just want to say bequeath to Andrea for giving us this kind of information, and that you don't stop, sister. Don't stop.
Thank you.
And I want to give my love, my honor, and my respect also to you and your nation.
Miigwech, thank you.
Well, it's about the time for us to go off the air. I'd like to thank everyone who has taken time to listen to our program tonight, and especially to our special guest, Andrea Landry. Miss Nabe from Canada, also as Kanakota. And it's been a really good 2 hours, and I hope full of information and insight to everybody on what's going on in Indian country. I'd like to say Sanoy Osta Eli Sedanale, Oganale Eli Nagida. Good night, and until we meet again, to my family, my friends, and all of our listeners, Toneda.